During his visit in Europe, the chief of US General Staff, Mark Milley, said that Russia has lost operationally, tactically, and also strategically. What does he mean by that? If we look at the last 20 years, it has been clear that the current regime, represented by the President Putin, has built on legitimacy, on its ability to wage a war. It was starting with Chechen War, then continued with Georgian War, grabbing the East territory of Ukraine in 2014, annexation of Crimea, and also war in Syria. But the strategic aim of Russia is actually disrupting unity of both NATO and EU, because Russia precisely knows that NATO will always be the strongest military alliance in the world, and it is not interested in facing this kind of adversary. So Russia has been trying for years to disrupt unity of NATO, to decouple the United States from Europe, to decouple Western Europe from Eastern Europe. It tried to undermine the decision making of NATO on its eastern flank through NATO-Russia Founding Act that stated that NATO was not entitled not just to extend its nuclear deterrence on its eastern flank, but also not to deploy substantial combat forces on its eastern flank. Similar with the EU, Russia is interested in having bilateral trade cooperation and economic cooperation with respective European countries. Nevertheless, it is not interested to deal with European as a whole, meaning that it is an entity where such a structure like European Commission has its say in external trade relations. It has its say also in some bilateral economic, energetic deals of European countries with Russia. It had its say also in first Yamal contract between Gazprom and Poland in 2011. It had its say also in Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. So Russia is interested strategically in disrupting this unity. But what happened with the current campaign? Russia, instead of trying to disrupt unity by any limited attack on its eastern flank, maybe Baltic states, this is what Russia was training for years. Instead of this, Russia attacked Ukraine. At the very beginning, it was a failure of Russian doctrine based on its ability to initiate very quickly the conflict, to cause a strategic shock to the enemy, and to get the enemy to negotiate or to surrender. So it failed, but it was still, let's say, failure operational. Then Russia tried to grab the Ukrainian territory and to attack Kiev. After failing to get into Kiev, and after big losses, the lost battles around Kiev, Chernigov, and Sumy, Russia still had the chance just to claim it failed operationally, meaning that it's what they call special military operation failed. So after those three big battles around Kiev, Russia, if it tried that time really to enforce some negotiated solution, declaring unilateral ceasefire and pushing for some kind of agreements, it could still claim that it failed the original, let's say, tactical or operational goal, but it achieved at least something, meaning diminishing of Ukraine military capabilities. That time, Russia was pushing and trying to push, and maybe it would found a positive echo among the European leaders. Recall what was the stance of the French president that time. So Russia could still achieve in the spring some kind of new version of Minsk agreement or 6-point agreement from the Russian-Georgian war. But instead of this, Russia kept its military campaign on the eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass, and it continued quite silly strategy to concentrate on certain spots to win at least individual battles. So it's concentrated on Severodonetsk, then Lysychansk, then Bakhmut. During the time, it's, in my understanding, Russia more and more was losing the opportunity to still push for any negotiated solution. Because Ukrainians were continuing the fights, and it was clear that they will never surrender and they will never accept some negotiated solution. And then Russia, at the autumn, to my surprise, I have to say, declared partial mobilization of its forces. And not only that, declared partial mobilization, which led, by the way, to the big exodus of 1 million of Russians outside the country, but it continued to do so, and it continued to put an hope in a continuation of the mobilization. So nowadays, the Russia is trying to mobilize in more and more forces and to throw them on the battlefield. But in my understanding, this is kind of trap. This is a strategic trap, because once you declare mobilization, regardless whether partially or entire mobilization, you kind of declare war. So nowadays, if Russia will not achieve its goal, despite the mobilization, it is not a situation that Russia lost just tactically or operationally, that it failed with its special military operation, or it failed with its attempt to occupy part of the Ukrainian territory. Nowadays, after mobilization, if it does not bring the success, and this is now what is it about, it means that Russia failed as a state. That regardless of mobilizing all its forces, all its resources, all its economy, it was not able to achieve the goal. That means Russia now is facing the situation that the Russian state, with all the apparatus, all the potential, will lose anyway. And this is what I regard as a strategic failure, strategic loss. What Mark Milley was referring to, operationally, tactically, and also strategically. Russia strategically has shown its inability to win the war. And I think that this fact will have a far-reaching consequences, not just for the world security order or relations between respective states, but it will have an impact on the status of Russia. In my understanding, Russia will not be anymore, not even regional power. It will be a failed state, and it will have far-reaching consequences on its ability to build up its own statehood, and also to project some power, or even to have some influence in its neighborhood. So therefore, I think the outcome of this war will be strategic, and it will be strategic loss for Russia.